about his experiences as a firefighter with the BWS, how he got started as a firefighter, and talk about some of the safety and how we can get involved as well as volunteering. Thank you, sir.
First of all, I'm sorry I'm so short. What I do, just quickly want to do, just because like this is so cool, is I just want to take a selfie. I don't have TikTok, but it'll go somewhere. So yes, thank you very much, Jemima and Farah, for the invite for today. I'm going to try and, I've got a lot to say, and I'm going to try and go through it all as quickly as possible. There's a lot of information, and hopefully there's going to be a little bit of time for questions at the end of it all. Otherwise, I'll stand outside for a couple of minutes if anybody wants to come chat and find out how you can join up and what the requirements are to become a volunteer wildfire, not wildlife. Wildfire services firefighter, because we are an awesome organization that has a lot of fun. So I've got a bit of a I've got a bit of a croaky throat. I was on a fire last night until about 1 o'clock this morning in Franschhoek. So I might cough a little bit every now and then because we did eat a little bit of smoke last night. Very tasty, nice fynbos flavor. But what that also means is that you're going to see some footage that I took last night that hasn't been seen anywhere else before. Volunteers are not normally allowed to share that kind of footage, but I was there in my professional capacity, and so I was allowed to film. So that's pretty quite cool. So, just to explain, I've got to just figure out how this works. There we go. My name is Rouvanne van den Berg, and those of you who understand Afrikaans will see the joke in my second name and my surname, being a wildland firefighter who works on the mountains. I've been a firefighter for 12 years, and 6 years ago I decided that this was such a cool job that I gave up everything else in my life and became a professional firefighter. And at the age of 49, I went back to university and became a fire and explosion investigator. So now, not only do I fight fires, but I also investigate fires. I've been with the volunteer VWS for 12 years. I'm a crew leader, and that means that I get to shout at people on the line and tell them what to do, which is a lot of fun. So who are the volunteer wildfire services? We've been going for 25 years. We have, absolutely awesome organization. Our base is just up here in Newlands. Has anybody here been to our open day before, when you were a little bit younger maybe? Yep, quite a few people, so you know who we are. You know, the helicopters and the hoses and all the fun that we have up at our Newlands base, which is pretty cool. And over the last 25 years, we have grown into 4 bases. We have a base here in Newlands, one in Noordhoek called South Peninsula. We have one in Stellenbosch and one in Somerset Helderberg area. As I said, we are about 350 volunteers. It changes every year. Some people fall away. But every year, especially after a year with big fires, we get a whole bunch of very enthusiastic new recruits who join up and come and join to become firefighters. We are 100% community funded. We don't get any money from the government. Businesses and private individuals sponsor us, and that enables us to drive in cool Land Rovers and Land Cruisers and get kitted out to go out and do our community service, which we do very, very gladly. That's a picture of me on the branch at the front there. That's at Deer Park in the City Bowl, working a big fire. Really cool, fun, very exciting, a little bit scary every now and then. Last night was pretty scary, as you'll see in some of the footage. It got a little bit hot. Just checking there's still awake down here. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we work in partnership with Sandparks, who manages the Table Mountain National Park, and also Cape Nature, that is involved further afield within the peninsula and within the Western Cape. So as we go to fires right throughout the Western Cape, wherever we are needed, our partners rely on us. They know that we're a very successful unit, and that if they send us up a mountain, there will be results on the other side. We love flame. That's what we go for. Sometimes we go and sit around and do a little bit of glorified gardening. We do a bit of digging and raking and that kind of thing. But most of us want to hit flame. That's our biggest passion. So fire is very scary, but as you might know, especially if you're doing biology and that kind of thing, it's vitally important in the Western Cape. We have one of the smallest plant kingdoms in the world. It only occupies 0.2% of the world's surface, but we have roughly about 11,500 different plant species that we need to look after, that you can only find in the Western Cape specifically, and very especially here on the peninsula in the Table Mountain National Park, which makes it such a privilege to have this on our doorstep right here, and that's why we are very, very passionate about looking after it. We, as a volunteer organization, we do a lot of training, and we have people that come from all walks of life. We have a lot of students from UCT that like to join us, from other universities too, Stellenbosch. We have a lot of professional people, we have young people, we have old people like me that decided in a later life that they want to become a firefighter because they can't afford a Harley Davidson or something like that. And very, very importantly is, which I'm quite proud of, is that we have one of the largest female representations, if not, well, definitely in South Africa, if not in the world. And it's sitting at about 30% of our firefighters are women, and they are tough women, let me tell you. It doesn't matter how small they are, they have to do exactly the same kind of rigorous training and testing that the big fat guys like myself have to do every year. So to explain, we train the entire winter from May to November, and at the end of October, we all have to re-qualify every single year. So we have to have done a certain amount of hikes, we have to have done a certain amount of scenarios where we go out and pretend, play that there's fire out there, and we have to do written tests and memorize a whole lot of very, very important rules that will keep us alive on the fire line. I'm going to ask for a silly volunteer just now to come up and feel my pack, just to give you an idea of how much. Come. Ja. Sy weet nie wat ons weet. Right, so basically what we have to do for our fitness test is we have to walk around the Rouvanne Common twice. Hello, I'm Rouvanne. We have to walk around the Rouvanne Common within 45 minutes, and we have to carry 20.5 kilos on our back. So, if you would like to try it on the backpack, hang on. It's not that bad. I ate all my food, so it doesn't have any food in it at the moment. And if you would like to just slip those over your neck, and if around your neck, there we go. This is a red helmet, it's a crew leader's helmet. I didn't know I had to do this. All right, if you could just stand there for the rest of my presentation, then I will just carry on over here. So basically, this is what we carry up onto the mountain with us. It never comes off our backs. Wherever we go, we have to carry it. It has all our water. So currently, this has 5 liters of water. As I said, I ate all my food last night, so there's no food in it. It has warm clothing, first aid kit. I have everything that I'm going to need for an 8 to 12 hour shift up on the mountain where we are not going to get any replenishments. Well done, thank you. All right, cool. So, yeah. Wonderful that I got a lady to come up and volunteer. Normally it's the guys that are wanting to do it as quickly as possible. So, as I said, we do a lot of training. We go out and we teach people how to roll up hoses. We teach them how to use their hand tools. We do first aid courses. We do map work. We do geography work. We do weather work. We try and prepare our firefighters as much as possible so that when they go out, they know what's happening around us, they understand fire behavior, they understand what can happen in the worst case scenario, they learn how to run really quickly, and as you've just seen, As you've just seen, we carry a lot of stuff with us, a lot of rehydrate, sweets, we love sweets, biltong, we love a lot of biltong, gives us energy, gives us go, sustains us for longer, we like samis, and then, of course, the wonderful people of Cape Town do surprise us with a meal every now and then. You end up high up on the mountain and somebody arrives with a bag full of Hudson's burgers, or Simply Asia. I've had pizzas, all kinds of things that are then donated to us because we are fighting fires. So it's really, really cool. So I want to show you a little bit of how does it feel to be in a wildfire situation. This was a fire in Betty's Bay in 2019. This is really from an outsider's perspective, not from our perspective. You will see that a little bit later. But it shows you a little bit about what it feels like to be in a fire. Yes, I hope I've got audio. No audio. We didn't think about that. Okay, so this was a fire. You can see the smoke is choking. As I said, we very often eat fire, smoke. People were stranded on the side of the road. 36 houses burnt down during that fire within Betty's Bay. If it had been more densely populated, far more houses would have burnt down. People got lost. They couldn't find their way. Many people were just stuck on the side of the road because the smoke was so thick they didn't know where to go. That elderly couple, they lost their car. Here you can see there's a person on the side of the road. They can't see anything, they don't know where to go. You just hear the roar of the flames and the crackling sound of flame was burning. And it is a very, very scary situation. As firefighters, we do tend to run towards that which everyone else runs away from. So, yeah, it's a tough job, but with the right training and everything, it's available. Everybody can do it. It's not that hard. It's just hard work and hot work, as was just demonstrated with our pack and everything. So we work very closely with other resources, with City Fire, with the District Fire Services, and we try and save, first of all, life is number one, property is number two, and unfortunately vegetation is number three. But vegetation grows back, we can't get lives back. So just like the Neisner fire, also in 2017, people had to evacuate down to the beaches, down to the sea to get away from the flames, and it was pretty scary stuff. Right, I've got more videos, so I'm just going to fast forward this now. So how do fires start? As I mentioned, I'm a fire and explosion investigator. That means that I can investigate fires in structures, in vehicles, in speedboats, marine, and as well as explosives. But my specialty is wildfire. That's what I'm passionate about. And so some of the causes that you will find some of the causes that you'll find that cause wildfires. You hear a lot of talk in the media about it. Oh, it's awesome, it's awesome, it's awesome. It's not always awesome. Humans are responsible for 85% of all wildfires worldwide, and that's a fact. But it's mostly because we're really stupid. We do really stupid things. We litter, that causes refraction or reflection. A bottle lying in the bush can catch, like a magnifying glass, can catch the sun's rays at the right moment, at exactly the right time, after no rain for a long time, with the wind blowing, in the perfect circumstances. Cigarettes, exactly the same. Not very, very common. Always shout at people that you see throwing stompies out of their car windows, but cigarettes it's very difficult for a cigarette to start a wildfire. Many of them are also lightning strikes, rock falls, you get sparks, cooking and heating, especially in the Western Cape. We have a lot of people that live on the mountain, that live rough, and they cook and they use fires for heating. Debris burning in your garden that might get away, a braai that might get away too, is also quite a common stupidity that we have to deal with. Equipment use, building, grinders, even exhausts of vehicles. You've been driving for a long time, you pull over on the side of the road, your exhaust is hot, there's some dry grass there, and it can start a fire very quickly. Fireworks, that Betty's Bay fire that I showed you just now, that was some people firing off a flare on New Year's Eve, wanting to celebrate the new year coming in, and he went to jail for that because somebody actually died in that fire. Spontaneous heating, your compost heap can generate enough heat in the middle of it that it can spontaneously burst into flames, as happened in England a couple of years ago, and they lost a number of houses. And of course, firearms. Yeah. As you can see, most of it is just people being bloody stupid out there. So always be aware, don't make a braai if there's a raging southeaster going on. Tell your parents not to braai, rather get takeout or something like that. Support some of the people that support us. As I said, 85% of all fires are human caused. But you can see that, so we had a fire on Sickle Hill the other day that ran up the hill. It started in Boerkaap area, running towards the noon gun. In the middle of the night, you know that is a human-caused fire, because how would there suddenly be a fire in the middle of the night? There's no vehicles there, it's in the middle of nowhere. Somebody started that fire, not necessarily deliberately, but it can happen. Climate change is also a major. So this last winter we had a far shorter rain period than normal. Our dams are quite low. We've had a lot of wind since October. That dries out the fuels, that dries out the soil, and then you have the chance of wildfires breaking out. So far we've lost about 100,000 hectares this season within the Cederberg, in the Overberg, so Pearly Beach, all the way up to George, Stanford, the fire that's busy raging at the moment in Franschhoek. We lose a lot of vegetation through wildfires. But, as I said, we live in the smallest plant kingdom of the world, and it is a fire. Fire is necessary for the vegetation that we have in the Western Cape. Many of the plants require fire to burst their seeds open. Also, if you've got a fynbos bush that might be 20 years old, the seeds that are living in the ground, and well, not living, just sitting, waiting in the ground under that fynbos, don't have a chance to get any sunlight. And it's only when that bush then burns down that they will then have the chance to come up and sprout and generate more seeds for a new generation. So it promotes diversity. But the problem is that we should only be having wildfires every 8 to 15 years. If it happens more often than that, then species start dying off and we lose the beauty that we have on Table Mountain and in the Western Cape. As I said, I'm going ahead of myself here, I'm just excited to show you flame pictures. We do like it. But, as I said, fynbos needs to burn. We need to protect life and property. We have encroached by building right up onto the urban edge. We call that the WUI. That's the wildland urban interface. That is where houses meet the natural area. And we, if you think before humans came and built big houses and swimming pools and all those kinds of things, in an area such as around the Table Mountain National Park, fire had a natural path. It had a natural cycle, a natural system. It would burn through an area, then it would not burn for a long time after that, and that just continued. Now we build houses in the way, and we panic when there's fire. Fire is a natural thing. We need fire within the Western Cape, and it's vitally important. So what we also do then is we do a lot of ecological burns. We do prescribed burning. We do fuel reduction burning. So if I mention a 20-year-old bush of fynbos, it's a good thing for that to burn. And if there's a whole patch of vegetation out there, we will try and burn it at some stage so that we can regenerate and keep diversity going. As I said, you don't want to do it too often, but it's vitally important that areas do burn. So I was also asked just to give you some advice about if you are hiking on the mountain, because hopefully a lot of you are spending time up on the mountain and enjoying it. What do you do in the event that you see fire? There are 5 main things. The first thing is that you are going to alert the authorities. If you are stuck and there's a fire down below you and you are on the mountain, you're going to let somebody know where you are. And secondly, you're going to let them know where the fire is and give as close a description as possible. You can't just say, there's a fire on the mountain. It's a big mountain. So you need to be able to tell people exactly, according to landmarks or whatever you have available, where the fire is, and then they will know where to come and find you. Secondly, never try and run uphill. You will not outrun a fire. It is far faster than you. It moves very, very fast. It preheats the fuels as it moves up a hill or up a mountain, and so you will not be able to outrun that fire. So try and move sideways. If possible, move down and get away from the fire. Move against the wind. Fire will naturally go with the wind. If you go with the wind, the fire will be following you all the way. So try and go into the wind to get away from the fire. Find a natural break in the vegetation. So either where the bosses are nice and low, or there's not that much vegetation, it's not that big, or there are natural outcrops, or a body of water, or something like that, and go and wait out the fire there. When the fire hits those rocks, the flames will get smaller, it'll move around those rocks. Rocks don't burn, they just explode. And you should be safer than if you were actually stuck in that fire. And of course, the old thing that we all learn at school, when there's smoke, get down low. The air down at the bottom is fresher and cooler. It's very, very difficult to stand up and breathe, as I said, eating smoke like we did last night. So yeah, those are just the basic advice that I give. So this was last night in Franschhoek. You can see a crew there waiting. We were waiting for that fire to come out over the mountain. It was right in a corner, and on a farm called 3 Streams. There's a crew waiting there. They've been waiting there for about an hour. We also waited for about an hour before that fire came over. And then this was what we were looking at. Gives you a bit of a round view of the fire as it is coming towards us. Even standing where I was there filming was incredibly hot. Fire services were all getting ready and waiting with us for the fire. Okay. This is what it looked like a little bit further along. Of course, flames get very big once they hit the trees, especially pine trees, any kind of aliens. They like it, they devour it. Pine trees also, because it's full of gum, they tend to explode. So it sounds a little bit like warfare when flames get into a large forest. And this is, look at that fire whirl. It's like a tornado. Conditions are incredibly unstable at that time. We know that the poo is about to hit the fan when we see that kind of thing. What it does is it sucks all the air in, it sucks the flames in, and you get a fire tornado, which then is called the fire whirl, fire tornado, and then at the top of that it spits out branches, logs, coals, that then cause spot fires well ahead of the flaming front. And in South Africa, the furthest spot fire that we have measured is 6 kilometers that occurred during the Knysna fires in 2017. So you have a flaming front, and 6 kilometers ahead of the main fire, a new fire starts because of a coal that is spat and carried by the wind. In Australia, of course, the Australians have, everything is a little bit scarier there. 30 kilometers is the furthest ahead of the main fire that a coal has been spat and started a new fire. So pretty scary. I'm just trying to change. There we go. There we go. And anyway, so things got pretty hairy, and the fire went into a dip and was starting to come up that dip, and we had a full crew there, and the crew had to get out, and this is what it resulted in. The flames are getting hot, coming towards us. The crew very coolly walked out with their hand tools. You can see, hi-ho, off to work I go. And then the embers started showering down on us, and things started getting really hot, and I had to run away. I couldn't hang around anymore. Yeah, it was getting a little bit hectic. Okay, I'm just trying to get through. And that's what happens after the fire has burned through. You're left with a really large braai area. Everything becomes coals, and yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's very beautiful. It's not scary anymore because there are no flames. Yesterday we only had about 10 meter flames, which isn't really high. When UCT library burnt down, I got chased off that mountain by a 75 meter wall of flame. That's hot. Let me tell you, 75 meters of flame, there's nothing you can do except run as fast as, and I don't run that fast. I'm getting old, so. And then we just have another little video just to give you an idea. And this is the kind of work that the crews are doing. They are beating the flames, smothering the flames as much as possible, using rakes to separate the burnt fuel from the green fuel, and that you can see that the whole bowl around us, what the flames looked like in that whole area. We were surrounded by a big braai. Sometimes we get water when we're lucky, but as I said, most of the time we are climbing up towards the fire. If you do see the helicopters dropping water, they are dropping water on us. We can't beat a 10 meter flame. Helicopter comes, drops water, the flames get smaller, we're able to move in and separate the fuels so that we can try and stop the progression of that fire. Often, we just sit. We sit, most beautiful views of Cape Town, off the beaten track, and we watch for that there are no logs that might start burning again and send showers and reignite a fire elsewhere. Sometimes we get lifts in helicopters. If we're very lucky that we don't have to hike up a mountain, then the helicopter will drop us off at the top, which is quite fun. I'm just trying to make a sell here. Please come join the VWS. You get to fly in helicopters. It's really cool. And sometimes we even spend Christmas Day, public holidays, up on the mountain. If you don't like your family very much and you don't want to spend Christmas dinner with them, VWS is great. We have a lot of fun, and everybody is joyous and merry, and you don't have to see your family. The main thing about fire, as I've said, It looks destructive, it leaves a lot of destruction in its path, but the beauty about fire is that after the flames, a lot of flowers come out and our mountain rejuvenates and looks absolutely incredible. So don't be scared of fire. It is a destructive force, but it is also positive. And thank you very much. Thank you. As I said, we still got 6 minutes if anyone wants to ask questions. Otherwise, I'll hang around outside for about 10 minutes afterwards once you guys have all left. And feel free to come and feel the pack or come and ask me whatever questions you'd like. Cool.
We have time for like 1 or 2 questions if anyone has anything that they want to ask.
Just my hands got hot because those coals were hitting me, and I didn't have gloves on because you can't use a camera with gloves. So when I saw, because I had my full PPE on except my gloves because I was being a TikToker. And so my hands got really hot, and so I had to turn around and run away because they were very hot.
Do you ever have the opportunity to save some animals? Snakes, deer, tortoises?
Animals are really clever. They know that fire is coming, and that we've sat out in Swillerland Mountains where it looks like the moon, looks like a moonscape. There's absolutely nothing, just rocks. And sitting next to a rock, and a little mouse pops out from underneath the rock. Looks absolutely fine, no problem. Yes, occasionally tortoises don't make it, but in my 12 years, I've seen a couple of dead tortoises, I've seen a couple of dead snakes, but that's it. Not much. They do manage to get out of the way. A helicopter costs probably about 40,000 Rand an hour per helicopter. Once you have 2 helicopters, then you have a spotter plane that directs them where to drop. So it can be a very, very expensive endeavor. The problem is, and this is a big one, it's all well and fine spending a lot of money, throwing a lot of money, and this is the same as for your exams. It's all well and fine throwing a lot of money to try and fix the problem when it's too late. If the City of Cape Town and if homeowners did more work in preparation for fire season, they wouldn't have to spend that amount of money on putting fires out. Prevention is better than cure. The more you study, the better you're going to do at your exams. That's what it comes down to. Sorry, and that's only the old Huey helicopters that we have in Newlands. Those are from the Vietnam War. They're really old. So if you're looking at the Black Hawk that's stationed in Stellenbosch or the Oryx, you're looking at about 50 to 60,000 Rand an hour per helicopter. If you're burning, you're too close to the fire. So it's a good question though, we wear 100% cotton. I know everyone likes to wear all these fancy clothing and it's got all plastic in it. You have to go to hospital and then they scrub your skin to get the plastic out of your skin. So wear 100% cotton and you will be much safer. It doesn't burn, it slowly but surely smolders. So you can be in a fire, you can be in a complete ember storm and still be safe. Well, it's called spalling. So what happens is when a fire goes up against a rock, the front face of the rock will explode off, and that, as a fire investigator, that's an indicator for me. It's a macro indicator. It shows me where the heat was coming from. So you'll find these thin flakes of rock that shoot off in the direction of where the heat came from. So it happens in every fire. Okay, that's what we've got time for. Thank you very much.